Good afternoon. Congratulations to the class of 2026. I think graduations are kind of an odd experience because it's a strange mix of joy and sadness, at least for those of us that have to let you go. Maybe you guys are all in on the joy and the excitement. But it's the end of a significant era in your lives, and it's the beginning of something new. With the exception of your families, the people who have surrounded you over the past 12 or 13 years will no longer surround you in the same way. But even your family dynamics change as you move toward more independence. Graduation is the end of some good things in your lives, and it's sad for those things to come to an end. Personally, this day brings me some sadness because I enjoyed every day that I had with you guys. And I don't like thinking too much about not having that anymore. It's nice to stand here and address you one more time, though, as a group. Aiden, I'm sorry, this is the last time I've addressed you as a group. I like it because it helps give me at least a sense of closure. This is it, and this is exactly how it should be. As sad as it is letting you go, couldn't be more happy for you. I think the Lord has incredible plans for your life and His world, and that gets me really excited. So we'll call graduation an 80-20 kind of thing, 80% joy, 20% sadness. At least that combination feels about right to me. But let's talk about what you're really excited about today. What you're really excited about today is freedom. Graduating from high school gives you an unrealistic sense of freedom. As though now you can finally do whatever you want. You knew this was coming from me. But do you know what you want? Maybe you do, but I suspect in a moment of honesty, many people might conclude, I don't really know what I want. You want to be free, but what does that freedom look like? It doesn't look like running around with nothing to do. It doesn't look like being jobless and without responsibility. When you think about it, your freedom depends on a lot of people doing their jobs well. You think about where your clothes come from, or where your lo mein dinner or breakfast or whatever meal you eat lo mein for comes from, the fuel for your vehicle. Think about the people and jobs required to get that vehicle fixed when something goes wrong. Who made the part? Where'd the material come from? Who shipped it? Where it needs to go? Who receives it once it gets there? Who stocks it on the shelf? Who built the shelf? Who's opening and running the store you buy that part from? Who installs it? The list just goes on, and that's just for a simple car part. But here's the point. If everyone was enjoying your vision of freedom, could you actually enjoy that vision yourself? In other words, if everyone lived the life that you think is ideal, could your ideal life exist? Maybe not. Doing whatever you want, if you actually know what that is, whenever you want, is a shallow and unrealistic view of freedom, and pursuing that vision of freedom is going to lead to a lot of frustration. Happy graduation. The Christian thinker and philosopher Dallas Willard said this. He said, if you want to see freedom, you don't look like a little kid. You don't look at a little kid jumping around with nothing to do. We see freedom when an accomplished artist sits down at a piano and plays something so beautiful that we can hardly stay in our seat. That's freedom. Now, how did he get there? He didn't get there by turning in on himself. He took the step that is always first in freedom, which is to submit himself to reality. That's the first step in freedom. Freedom through submission. That probably sounds counterintuitive, but we know that that's how most of life works. If you're going to be proficient at something, you have to submit yourself to reality. Your golf game has to be in line with reality. You can't just start swinging and doing whatever you want and expect good results. Your piano playing has to be in line with reality. You can't just start banging on the keys and doing whatever you want and expect something other than noise. Your writing, believe it or not, needs to submit to the rules of written language. You can't just spell words however seem best and omit or insert various punctuation at random and expect a reader to understand your thoughts. You pick a skill, you pick a profession, and you immediately find that refusing to submit to reality will result in failure. Life's the same way. If you refuse to submit to reality, to live in the world as God created it, then you're going to constantly run up against it in ways that are harmful to you, and you'll experience anything but freedom. Take a look around this room. This is a pretty well-designed, orderly room. When you walk out of here, most of you are going to use the aisles, and very few of you are just going to ping pong your way out of the building, running into pews and walls until you find the exits. In fact, if most of us witness such a thing, we might offer to help that person and point out the fact that walking the aisles is the way to maneuver through a room like this. But imagine that person reacting with, "Don't tell me how to live my life," and then insisting on crashing into the pews in an attempt to leave the room. A bit later, you hear him, obviously this is a guy, you hear him mumbling about how the room was obviously poorly designed, the architect obviously doesn't love me, otherwise this wouldn't be such a painful and frustrating experience. But then you notice something that you somehow failed to notice about this guy. He's wearing a sleeping mask the whole time. He can't see, which is why the room has proven so difficult for him to navigate. Maybe a well-intentioned person suggests maybe you remove the mask, to which he replies, "But it feels good. Don't tell me how to live my life." Imagine that guy making it to his car. That sounds like a ridiculous scenario, and it is. But that's what life is like when you're not living in the light of truth and submitting to reality. There's no freedom there, even if you're doing whatever you want. Boundaries, what sometimes feel like restraints, are in place for your freedom. I love this quote by G.K. Chesterton, who famously observed this about Christianity. He said, "The more I considered Christianity, the more I found that while it had established a rule and an order, the chief aim of that order was to give room for good things to run wild." Freedom requires submitting to reality, and submitting to reality requires truth in order to navigate it well and run wild within its life-giving boundaries, which brings us to the person of Jesus. In 1 Corinthians 1, Paul says that Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He's before all things, and in him all things hold together. Jesus is the truth because he designed, created, holds together, and reflects reality. If you want to find your freedom, you'll find it by following and living in obedience to him. I have a lot of favorite stories about Jesus. All of his interactions with people were brilliant, but one of them includes the story of what's usually called the rich young ruler. 26, we don't know his name, so what do we call him? Hank. We're going to call this guy Hank. One day when Jesus is setting out on a journey, Hank runs up and asks, "Good teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" If you stop and think about that for a second, he's asking the right person the right question. This guy looks like he knows what he's doing, but he made a small misstep. Called Jesus good teacher, which I think maybe was a flattering comment, and Jesus didn't buy that. "No one's good but God," he tells the young man. But he does address his question nonetheless. He says, "You know the commandments." And he starts to list some of the commandments, and he leaves a few key commandments off the list. He leaves off things like don't have other gods before me, don't covet, don't worship idols. But for the list that Jesus does give, Hank confirms that he's kept these commandments since his youth. And then Mark says something interesting about what happens next. He says, looking at him, Jesus felt a love for him. Now, how did Mark know that? Mark's traditionally told from Peter's perspective. And when Peter's telling Mark about these stories with Jesus, it's like maybe Peter had seen that look before once. Before the cock crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. It's like I think he's looking back on this interaction with Hank, and he's like, I've seen that look before. He loved this guy. I suspect that's part of what was happening there. It's a painful truth that he's about to deliver with absolute love. So Hank gets the same treatment as Peter. One thing you lack, Jesus says. In most of our books, that's not doing too bad. You're only lacking one thing. If we knew him, we'd all assume that he was a shoo-in for eternal life. He's moral, he's polite, he's well off. He has the good sense to ask Jesus, of all people, about eternal life, and he almost gets the answer that he's looking for, which I suspect was something like, yeah, you're good enough, or you've done enough. But of course, that's neither the point nor the answer. Jesus holds him for a moment with that look of love and then speaks the painful truth. One thing you lack. Go and sell all you possess. Can and go give away all your life money. And give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me. And then Mark says this, but at these words he was saddened, and he went away grieving, for he was one who owned much property. That reaction baffles me. He went away sad and grieving. He's not offended. He's not angry. He's not combative. He doesn't push back in any way. Jesus spoke the truth, but rather than submitting to that truth, rich young Hank walks away sad and grieving. That's not freedom, even if he did enjoy his comfort and wealth for a time. But I was thinking about it. It's like, where's that guy's property now? It may not have survived Rome's sack of Jerusalem some years after that conversation. This guy's wealth and name are long gone. Could it have been worth it? The writer Anthony Eslin says this about the young man in Mark 10. It is a cross that he will have to carry, but it is Jesus whom he will follow. But he saw only the darkness of the door, and he didn't enter. You can't have other gods before Jesus and expect them to save you or to bring you freedom. Yes, following Jesus comes at a cost. You have to die to sin, the sin that so easily entangles you. But the great thing about following Jesus is that his death conquered the power of sin, and he came out the other side of death alive, which means that you will too. There is a darkness to the door, but I've never heard an account of a Jesus follower who regretted the things they died to in order to follow Jesus in the one life we have to live. Whatever other pursuits you're called to in life, make sure that your first and highest priority is the person of Jesus. Obey and follow him at all costs, and let Hank be a lesson to you. You see, freedom's not primarily an external condition. Your external conditions are going to change, and if you're looking for those things to bring you freedom, you're not going to find it. Primarily, freedom's an internal reality, and that's the thing that Jesus sets you free from, and that's something you can experience irrespective of your external conditions. Class of 2026, if you want to experience real freedom, go all in on Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Obedience to him is where your freedom lies. Following him means living in the light of truth, which is the only way that navigating reality makes any sense. Just like walking around this room with the blinders off and the lights on. Even if your external situation includes more restraints than you'd like, the internal freedom of being free from sin and guilt and alive to Jesus in his world, well, that's something you won't find anywhere else. In this next season, I hope that's the freedom you enjoy. I love you guys.